Hello and welcome to Better Wethersfield. My name is Michael Bizzano. I'll be hosting the program today. Today I'm joined by Gary Catania, who is the owner and proprietor of Gary's Fitness of Wethersfield, Connecticut. Gary has quite the distinguished resume. He is an American College of Sports Medicine specialist, former ACE certified personal trainer, former CEO and president of one of the largest fitness distributors in the Northeast, and he has nearly 20 years of experience and over 500 clients. Gary, thank you so much for joining us today on the program.
Mike, thanks for having me.
Thank you as well. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about, it seems as if there is a bit of an oversaturation of personal trainers nowadays. Not just the trainers themselves, but the way to go ahead and get certified. This seems to have diluted the industry a little bit. Can you talk about how the industry was back then and how it is today and how it's changed and how people can recognize a good trainer from a bad one?
That's a great question, and you're absolutely right. Over the last few years, the market has become somewhat saturated with personal trainers for a couple of reasons. Backing up for the history first, going back maybe 10, 15 years ago, in order to be certified, there were a great deal of processes that had to take place, especially with organizations such as the American College of Sports Medicine, the National Academy of Sports Medicine. You had to meet certain protocols, and you still have to meet those today. Where other type of certifying units, a lot of times now you could get online and really just do a mini test and come up with a certification. It's obviously not the greatest way to become certified as a trainer because you miss out on all the protocols that need to take place. For instance, one of the things that I do is I teach as an adjunct professor, teaching personal trainer trainees on how to become trainers. That's an 18-month program. So it takes quite a bit of time to acquire all the correct information that needs to be processed and how to deal with clients with different populations and all. So what we try to emphasize as certified fitness instructors and as trainers is when you're looking for a trainer, always look for certain qualifications. First thing is that they should have a certified number that if you were to ask me, Gary, what's your American College of Sports identification number, I would be able to give you that number right off the top of my head, and you would be able to reference that back to get any information that you need to secure on me to make sure that I am who I am. If you're starting to train with someone that does not have that criteria or cannot offer that, you know you're starting off on the wrong track. But there has been an explosion. One of the other reasons for that is that a lot of people think this is a great way to make a living part-time and that there's a lot of money in it. Truth be known is that you have to establish a clientele and you have to really enlist the trust of that individual or individuals to be able to carry on and have them come back time and time again to see you. So there's a lot, Mike, that plays into it, and hopefully that gives you an idea.
Absolutely. With that said, do you think that given that there are so many ways to be certified, that's really the issue, is that the people, they may come in initially, they may be interested right off the bat, but if you don't have that experience, if you don't have that education on how to keep people coming back for more, ultimately you're not going to be a successful trainer.
Yeah, you make a great point, because what happens is a lot of the trainers starting out think that, okay, I'm going to attract 20, 30 clients a week at X amount of dollars, and it's going to be an easy way to make a living. Mm-hmm. That's not true. You have to, again, establish that trust and confidence from the individual or individuals. And trainers that come into come into the fold with grand illusions that things are going to happen overnight just doesn't happen. They become frustrated, and 3 months later, 6 months later, they're out of the game. Because when dealing with individuals, whether it be for a weight loss program, a cardiovascular program, flexibility program, any of those natures, there's a lot involved. Someone just can't walk into your studio or into a gym and you're going to say, okay, well, I'm going to train you in these protocols today. Mm-hmm. It takes time to develop a lesson, to really make sure that you're giving the full attention to that client that they need. And truthfully, people know if you're engaged, and they pick up on you right away. They'll know how committed you are to helping them reach their goal.
Well, that is an excellent point. We talked about this before the show. This is, with the shifting demographics in America, this is something that we're all looking at, and we're all wondering how this is going to play out. With the baby boomer generation, people getting older, more of our population being older, it seems to me that in order to not incur the costs down the line when it comes to hospital visits, nutrition, things that people ultimately will have to deal with, that there's a great incentive for people in their 60s, 70s, whenever, to really make an effort to get in shape. As in, it's never too late. And sometimes when you get to the end of the line, you really don't have a choice. It's as if you better work out or else you're going to pay the price. Is that what you're seeing nowadays?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of interesting that you bring that up, because from my own practice, my oldest client is 85 years old.
Wow.
And that particular person works out with me at least one time a week, sometimes even more. But going back to the original thought process that you had about baby boomers and going forward, as you're probably aware, right now in the United States, there's what we'll call an epidemic of obesity. 66% of the American public is overweight, which has caused health care in the United States to really skyrocket in cost. So one of the things that we like to teach as certified trainers is a theory called bodies in motion. You got to get up and move. And even some of the websites, like on apps on phones now, you'll see that they have a step program where they want you to meet a certain amount of steps taken on a daily basis. A lot of talk has been brought forward about moving 10,000 steps in a day. That may sound like a lot, but if you're consistently moving and up and about, those goals could be made. Further, as we go forward, as the population is aging now, things such as diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, have really forced people into the mindset that they need to exercise. It's not anymore really a luxury. People back just as short as maybe 5-10 years ago looked at exercise a little bit differently than they are now. So that's good in a way, because we are getting our word out that, hey, you need to get off the couch, you need to get out in front of the TV or out from the TV and do something. Whether that's a brisk walk for 3 to 4 days a week, or doing some light weight training, or even some flexibility type of stats and all, it really is going to help you. The other issue that the baby boomers have in their favor is, for the most part, they have disposable income. Okay? Personal training could range anywhere in the state of Connecticut from $35 an hour to $100 an hour, depending upon which area of the state that you're working out in, and depending upon the qualifications of the trainer. Based on those numbers, someone that's coming to have personal training lessons is going to be taking the process a lot more seriously. I've seen in the past few years, Michael, where people, they're willing to spend the money, but they want to reach a goal. They want you to help them. In some cases, people want you to do the exercise for them, but that's, just doesn't happen that way. And there's just a lot going on in that age group, and it's never too late to start exercising. Seriously, for an 85-year-old that I have in my studio, he's more motivated than I've seen people of age 30 and 40. So it's never too late. The gains that we can make as human beings, as individuals, it's scientifically proven that there's a lot that can be done even in later years.
And it comes down to the quality of life that you want to lead. It's really difficult, I think, for a lot of people, especially when they have a family in their 30s and 40s, and the focus is on the family, it's on kids, it's on finances, and somewhere in there, nutrition, activity, all that gets lost in the shuffle as you're trying to shoehorn everything into your daily routine. Do you find that when people get older and all of a sudden they have this free time, that they're looking around and saying, boy, I'm a little heavier than I want to be.
Oh, sure.
I'm not as, maybe my mental state isn't what it should be. Are you seeing people coming in saying, there's got to be more to life than this? I thought I did it all right, but what else is there? Is that what you're seeing?
Oh, yeah. We're seeing a lot of that where people feel that they have missed the boat. Time has a way of getting by. I think back to January 1st of this year. We're now December 4th tonight. I say to myself, where did the time go? Where did this year go? And really, we hear that from people where they said, I should have started this 3, 4, 5 years ago, this program of training, but they now have taken on the initiative and have started something. It's kind of interesting. Even as a qualified personal trainer, I often think about what motivates people to get up at 5 in the morning on a cold day to exercise either indoor or outdoor or whatever. Specifically, my schedule is fairly crazed, so my exercise time is at 4:55 a.m. in the morning, 5 o'clock, to be on the treadmill or to be on the elliptical or lifting weights, whatever. But once you find that commitment and you have that real interest in that effort that you want to put forward, it becomes second nature. So at that point, I hate to use the word hooked, but you've bought into the program, you've bought into that life could be better for you. Quality of life, as you said, could be a lot better if you just follow some simple, easy routines. As a fitness trainer, I'm not saying that you need to be out 7 days a week, doing vigorous exercise. The latest information from the American College of Sports Medicine basically says if you do vigorous exercise for approximately 150 minutes a week, it may sound like a lot, but when you break it down, that's 5 30-minute exercise bouts, that you will be able to maintain your weight or decrease your weight depending upon what your goals are and what you have in front of you. So there's a lot going on in that area. It's a very interesting aspect.
Oh, that's good to hear. Now, you mentioned your own personal routine before,
sure.
And again, looking at your credentials, I mean, they're pretty extensive, and
Thank
you do have a tremendous amount of experience. I often tell people, as someone who has some experience in the industry, in the fitness industry, that it is a constant evolution, that you don't, in other words, when people come to see you and they say, well, Gary, I'm overweight, I would imagine that one of your initial responses to them is, well, fitness doesn't happen overnight, but because of that, or due to that, you didn't get fat overnight either. This is a process that has developed over several years. Can you walk us through your own experiences with getting to be the individual you are today, someone who leads by example, someone who is very fit himself?
Sure.
What was your evolution in fitness?
You know, when I started out in this, I was what we'll call a youngster. I was roughly about 21 years old. Mm-hmm. And the biggest reason was not so much fitness why I got into this. When I first took that first step as far as wanting to be a trainer, I always loved exercise, but there was a secondary goal. We were putting a son through college, which at that point happened to be about $40,000 a year, and we needed extra income. So I looked at a lot of revenues and said, or a lot of avenues and said, okay, what could I do that I enjoy? And one of the things that I enjoyed was working with people and trying to help them. But I had to realize, too, that before I could have someone come into my studio or go into their house, that I needed to set the example myself. In other words, I couldn't show up at a person's house or have them show up at my studio with me being, not to laugh at, but with me being 10, 20 pounds overweight and saying, okay, this is what you're going to do and this is what you need to follow. In other words, I had to lead by example. So starting off in the early age of, my segment of getting into the training aspect, I did all different types of training, anywhere from cardiovascular workouts, doing wind sprints, weightlifting, a lot of different what we call reverse pyramid lifts, where you would use a heavier weight and then decrease the amount of reps that you have. And I paid special attention to the core area. And that's something that we should talk about at some point tonight, because basically everything centers around the core of your body. I look at the core as being your abs and your back. And in order to progress forward as we age, you need to have a stronger back and you need to have stronger abs. I'm not saying you need a six-pack, but I'm saying they need to support one another. So through the years, what I focused on was staying lean, staying trim, and just as anyone else in life, you meet some bumps along the road. And, a personal story that I always like to share with people is, in my mid-50s, I had one of those bumps where, I had a brush with cancer. And at that point, I was out of the game of training for a while. Exercise became secondary. Mm-hmm. But as I refocused in on my life and all, I found that exercise was really, along with the support of my family, my wife in particular, was what brought me back to be where I needed to be. And telling that story to individuals who come in and say, geez, I've gained 60 pounds over the last 5 years, they understand that it didn't take them a year to get there. It took them 5 years maybe to get there. Truth of the matter is, safe weight loss right now is about 1 pound to 2 pounds a week. And there's a lot of trainers out there that will say to you, hey, I could have you lose 10 pounds in a week. And that could be done, depending upon a person's weight. Mm-hmm. But let's put it this way, the faster you lose that weight, the quicker you're going to put it back on. Our body is about 60% plus of water, water weight. So there's all kinds of methods, there's all kinds of tricks where trainers could get people to lose weight overnight. That's not the correct way of doing things. And that's what I've preached all my life. But when we look at, I could go back and really look at my own progression and say, here's where I've been. This is where I am now at age 62. I'm in pretty good shape, still can run an 8-minute mile, which isn't great, but still is pretty good. And people really, once they believe and trust in you, you'll be surprised how much effort they'll give you back.
I think it's really impressive that before it became trendy to talk about core fitness, that was your focus.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what's really led you to where you are today, is having that progressive mindset of understanding what needs to be done to keep your body moving forward in a positive direction. Can you talk a little bit more about core fitness, what that means, and why people should really focus on that as opposed to what I like to call the beach muscles,
Sure.
Biceps, chest, which are great and all.
Yep, the show muscles.
The show muscles, but you need to focus on what really is going to keep you healthy. Could you talk a little bit more
Absolutely.
about that?
Basic concept here is very interesting because most people feel to have a strong core, they need to do hundreds of abdominal movements or back movements, whatever. The truth of the matter is that's all incorrect philosophy. Some of that is going to help, but not hundreds of those exercises a day. For instance, I could start training you and say, look, we're going to do X with regards to your core. And my belief as a trainer, which may or may not be true, may be to say to you, okay, we're going to have you do 5 sets of 12 ab movements a day, and that's going to help define your midsection. It may or may not. The piece that plays a significant role in the core, in the core aspect of things is 2 things: cardio and nutrition. Okay? So let's go back to this basic concept. I could have you working out crazy, but if your nutrition, and we'll talk about that in a second or two, if your nutrition and your cardiovascular workout is not great, you're not going to gain anything. So basically for core, what I'm recommending, depending upon the age group, would be some good abdominal movements. Incidentally, the ab muscles are one of the strongest muscles, if not the strongest muscle in the body, where you could exercise that grouping day to day, where you cannot with any other group of muscles. In other words, if we do a chest press today and exercise our pectoral muscles, we're not going to do that tomorrow. The body needs a day of rest to be able to recuperate and to be able to move forward to make gains. Not necessarily true with the abdomen or even the back, but in particular the abdomen. So the focus again being on the core with good cardiovascular work, being maybe 30 minutes of walking, swimming, biking, elliptical training, anything where you get your heart rate up, but not exceedingly what we'll call over and above a certain range. There's certain formulas that each trainer that's qualified to understand the protocols will use. For instance, at birth, our heart rate beats 220 beats per minute. As we age, it beats 1 less beat per year. So if we take our age minus that 220, that gives you a 100% training type of threshold. As a trainer, I'm never going to train you at 100%. I might train you at 60, 70, 80, 50%, depending upon where we're headed. Generally, the fat burning zone, which helps the core, is around 60 to 70% in that area there. So hopefully that's answered some of what you have. Go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. And I think to touch on your point, you mentioned swimming, biking, running. I think when people think of core exercise, they don't realize how active their core is in a lot of these movements.
Yes.
And that it's not doing 1,000 crunches that's going to make you into a super athlete. It's not the ab lounge. It's not these gimmicks that we see time and time again that may improve in the short term.
Yes.
They may give you a boost. They may hit that muscle group that you've been neglecting all these years. But ultimately, you're going to plateau. You're going to fall into old habits. You're not going to see the results that you expected after putting in more continuous effort. So after a while, it's people are frustrated. They don't have the understanding of what it takes to be fit. Whereas with your methods of variation, of not making people run till they pass out every session. That's
Right.
another, I think, misconception that people have.
That's great. Yeah.
There is physical discomfort with
Yes.
exercise, but it doesn't need to be acute physical pain.
Yeah.
And is that something you see with people starting out?
That's such a great point. You know, in the past we used to hear no pain, no gain. I'm sure you remember that philosophy. Respectfully, from my perspective as a qualified trainer, I don't subscribe to that theory at all. Simply due to the fact that if you're trained properly and if you do exercise in the proper manner, yes, you are going to work out and you're going to feel a good workout, but you're not going to work out to the point where you're going to pass out, whatever. There's a lot of controversy right now, Michael, about certain programs, which I won't, go into, but certain programs that really stress the body beyond what I would call would be the normal limits. And for some people, well, that's fine. But for others, someone, for instance, that's sedentary, that's coming into my studio, for me to say to them, hey, I'm going to put you on a treadmill and we're going to have you run 10 miles today, I shouldn't be a trainer. And you have to recognize that with people. What are their limitations? And starting right from there, incidentally, one of the first things that a qualified trainer will do is that they will sit down with you and they will go through a series of questions and they will ask you, they will get a medical history on you. And at that point, that trainer needs to be very, very honest with himself or herself and say, okay, this person, I could train them. They're among what we would refer to as the apparently healthy, which is what my certification allows for. Or if they're out of that area of, let's say they have some contraindications that I'm not capable of working with, the trainer has to be fair and refer that person out to someone that has much more knowledge in those areas. We don't see a lot of that today because what happens is someone comes into a studio, trainer's all excited about training them and says, oh, I could help you with your problem. But from the point of view of that initial sit down from a medical clearance, with a lot of my clients that haven't been active with exercise within a certain amount of time, I'll ask for a doctor's clearance. We'll get all that information. I do blood pressure checks on a per session type of basis. A lot of trainers don't do that. I like to do that simply to know what we're dealing with for today. Someone might have had a bad day and their blood pressure might be through the roof. I might elect that I'm not going to train them in the protocols that I was going to do that particular day. So a lot evolves around that medical history, what you see in a person, what their goals are, what I think their goals should be. A lot of times it's sharing. If someone comes in and says to me, hey, I want to lose, I'll make this up, I want to lose 100 pounds in 10 weeks, it's not going to happen. And the reason I've been successful, quite frankly, is I'm very forward with an individual. Sometimes people don't want to hear that they're not going to be able to make a goal in a certain amount of time. But best be honest up front than to set them up for a fall later on down the road.
Well, that is an excellent point. I want to touch back on what you mentioned before regarding water. Specifically, sure. In the time of the year that we're in, it's cold, it's dark. People don't put hydration at a premium at this time of year. They do in the summertime. They do when it's hot and they're sweaty. What can you tell us about proper hydration and how important water is to the human body?
Another excellent question. Water, in my opinion, is probably the most important element that an individual should be thinking about for many reasons. If someone's interested in weight loss, water is going to help them. If someone's interested in just being able to stay more active, water is going to give them that boost. Now, the latest rule of thumb on water is, and this doesn't apply to everyone, I'm going to give you a general rule, okay? If you take your weight and divide it by 2, that's the amount of ounces of water that you should be drinking. So let's say my weight's about 150 pounds, whatever. I should be consuming about 75 ounces of water, 150 divided by 2. Someone coming into the studio or me training them in their home, whatever, because I do both, if they haven't consumed that amount of water in years, there is no way that I'm going to convince them to say, hey, you need to start today by drinking 75 ounces of water. The old rule of thumb used to be 8 ounces of water, 64 ounces of water, 8-ounce cups or glasses, whatever. That still, to a certain point, holds true. To go back to your original question, though, hydration is so important because when someone gets to the stage of dehydration, many different things could happen. Confusion builds in, dizziness builds in. There's a lot of various side effects that could have a problem with people in their normal, everyday type of activities. Winter, from what I see, is the most difficult part to keep people hydrated. It's cold out. They don't want to drink water to a degree. So what I try to explain to them is, look, try to get your water segment in the first part of the day, okay? The early morning part of the day. So the latter part of the day, it's out of the way. You don't have to worry about it. Your intake is done. There's really no scientific rule that someone's going to say, hey, I gave you some general guidelines, but there's really no scientific rule that you have to drink that 75 or 64 ounces. As long as you feel, that you're getting in enough water. That doesn't mean, of course, 2 ounces of water a day or whatever. Mm-hmm. And keep in mind also, as long as we're talking about it, coffee dehydrates you. A lot of people think that, oh, okay, I'm going to have my coffee fix this morning. Many of my clients are coffee drinkers. Even myself, I like to have a cup of coffee once a week with my wife on a Saturday, whatever. Mm-hmm. But you got to be careful because certainly if you're going to be working out or if you're only drinking coffee during the course of a day, it's going to have a significant impact on your body.
That is an excellent point. Are there other beverages? I drink a lot of seltzer, for instance. Yeah. I understand there's some carbonation there. It might not be as ideal as water is, but I think at this point in our culture, people recognize that coffee, it is something that we are going to consume.
Sure.
It's the most popular beverage in America, I do believe, and although
right.
Tea is actually the most popular beverage in the world, do you find that you are trying to convert people at all who are hooked on coffee? They don't want to give up that rush. Are you trying to steer them to green tea or possibly other beverages if they're not willing to go ahead and drink a lot of water?
Yeah. Again, a great question. One of the things that I try to do, let's take, for example, a client that I'll start training might be drinking, I'll make this up, 4 cups of coffee a day. Well, I know from the psychological factor, because one of the courses that I teach is exercise psychology, one of the main things that trainers have to understand is that people are not going to give up their habits completely. So if you come in to the studio or I see you at your home and you tell me during our first get-together that, hey, I consume 32 ounces of coffee a day, I'm not going to say to you, cut it out totally. What I'm going to say to you is, Michael, okay, I understand you like coffee, and, I like it too to a certain degree. What I'm going to suggest is cut your coffee intake down by 1/3 to start out with. Or maybe if you feel you could cut it down by half, do that. So they still have that ability to be able to enjoy the beverage of their choice. The next step that I would try to do is to get them onto another type of beverage that they might enjoy. You brought up green tea, that type of thing. There's a lot of studies going on right now on the importance of green tea, black tea, and the effect that it has on the body. One of the things that I should point out to you is this. Latest study through several of the qualifying agencies state to us that any exercise bout over 60 minutes in duration requires something a little bit different than water, because water will not replace some of what the body has released. So you'll see people that will tout certain low sugar drinks, which I won't discourage that, but it's got to be in moderation. In other words, if you're doing a run and you're in the shape to be able to do a run for 60 minutes, you're going to require something a little bit beyond water to put the electrolytes back in to your body. And without giving anyone a specific boost, there's drinks out there that can suffice and help you in those areas.
Okay, excellent. Going back to the motivation aspect, we're in the middle, we're actually in late fall right now at the start of December. When this episode airs, we'll probably be in the wintertime.
Sure.
People, I really think this time of year, and this is what I see when I talk to people in the fitness industry, the people that come in, they say, well, I'm just not feeling that great today, and it's so dark out, and it's cold, and a lot of it is people really putting pressure on themselves to be more motivated this time of year than they have to be.
Yes.
Meaning that it's easy to get up early when it's May or June, and you've got almost unlimited sunlight, or at least it feels that way. But this time of year, when it's dark, you really have to fight. You really have to find that motivation to get in. What do you tell your clients and others who ask for you for advice? What do you tell them to combat that type of seasonal depression, I guess you could say in some cases?
Sure. That's one of the most difficult things that I as a trainer face. And there's no easy solution to that. But one of the things that I found helps with that particular situation is if people could get some results, if they could see some results, whether it be weight loss, whether it be muscle gain, whatever, that's a motivation for them to keep going. But the basic instinct or the basic premise that I try to instill in clients and in people is this, is that exercise is exercise. Whether we perform it in the morning or in the evening, and there's a little bit of a controversy here, which I'll touch base on in a second. Mm-hmm. It's still exercise. Mm-hmm. The part about it being cold and dark, those are very hard to overcome. It's all about getting in your mind the picture that you see of yourself. And that form of training is a whole other form that we call imagery, okay? What I try to instill in a client is, how do you want to see yourself 3 months from now, realistically? Where do you want to be in 3 months? Where do you want to be in 6 months? Any trainer that is worth their weight in knowing what they should know understands that results take a minimum of 13 weeks. So in cycles, 13 weeks is roughly 3 months. So what I try to instill in them is, let's sit down and let's paint a picture of where you want to be. What do you want to look like? And let's be realistic about this. And that, what I found with that is it helps really keep them focused on where they need to be. It backs off a little bit of that, it's too cold out, it's whatever. I'm working towards a goal now, and this is where I want to be. And as soon as you start seeing a little bit of results, even if it's weight loss, about 80% of the calls that I get, Michael, are people that want to lose weight. So if it's about weight loss and your client loses a couple of pounds in the first week or two, you really have that in your favor, and you can push with that and keep them focused on that. But that's the toughest one to overcome.
So is it an acute positive visualization that you make them? You want them to say, picture yourself in 3 months or 4 months, however long. You're on the beach. You want to look great in that new swimsuit. Are those the types of motivation techniques that you use to get people to get out of the winter doldrums?
Sure. For instance, depending upon what their goal might be, someone might be taking a vacation to the Virgin Islands, or someone might be a party and a wedding, whatever. We want those people to start thinking about what they want to look like and where they want to be in that frame of time. And if you could get them thinking that way and reinforce that and celebrate their successes that are really become victories at that point, whether it be weight loss, muscle gain, whatever. And when I say celebrate, I'm someone that really believes in positive reinforcement. So we celebrate with the fact that, hey, Michael, you did a great job on this. You know, we're really on the road to success. You got it all coming together, and let's just keep it going. If you could get that upbeat type of philosophy to the client or to the individual, you're halfway home.
And they usually respond to that type of impetus, if you will.
Absolutely. You know, I've seen people that, you know, have been very hard to really get them to respond, but my job as a trainer is a motivator. It's more of a personal coach nowadays, you know, explaining to them that I could help them. I can't do the work for them, but I could help them and try to get them to achieve their goals.
Excellent. I want to talk about nutrition now. We discussed this a little bit with the hydration element previously. One of the key issues I've seen over the last 10 years or so is the question of whether carbohydrates are essential. Are they bad for you? Are they necessary? From my perspective, there's no black or white answer to it. It is very complicated. But as someone who is basically an expert in your field, can you help the viewers at home? Can you clarify what carbohydrates are and how they factor into a healthy body?
Sure. First off, let's start with the basic premise that a food program, and you noticed I did not say diet, because as a trainer I do not believe in diets. I believe in food behavioral programs, okay? There's a huge difference there. With any food program, you need to have a balance of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. You're never going to be able to eliminate, for the long term, any of those particular ingredients. Now, in response to your question, there's good carbohydrates and there's not good carbohydrates. The big thing right now is all about a 5-letter word called sugar. There's been so much research that's been done in the last 2 to 3 years about sugar and its effect on the body and how bad it is for us, where people now are really starting to understand that, you know, for instance, pastry goods. And everyone, you know, look, everyone likes pastry goods at whatever time of the year. They have to understand that in moderation things are okay. But if I was to say to you, Michael, go home and have a couple of muffins every night, whatever, I should not be certified as a trainer. So yes, good carbohydrates being those that are low in sugar and are sustainable in regards that they are going to give you an energy boost are good. Certainly a lot of fruits are considered carbohydrates, you know, that type of thing, because they have a sugar component to them, a natural sugar component to them, whereas, again, to refer back to maybe and not to knock the pastry industry, but that's a whole different category. You know, even when we look at the aspect of white bread, and again, not to knock that, but, you know, when you look at the first ingredient on your product that you're consuming, the first ingredient is the most volume in that ingredient. So if the first ingredient is sugar, we have a problem, okay? Whereas if the first ingredient in a slice of bread is whole wheat, we know that it's better for us. You know, darker colors a lot of times are much better for us than lighter colors. But to clarify, any good food program needs a combination of all of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, along with water intake. And if people follow that rule, they'll be okay.
Do you find that people have a misconception when it comes to fat? They think that if I eat fat, I'm going to get fat.
Yeah.
It's a pretty simple association and an erroneous one that people make. What I've been able to find is that when people don't eat enough fat, their bodies hold on to whatever fat they get. So as a result, they're not getting the desired results that they want. They're putting on weight. Can you talk a little bit more about the misconception of fat and how important that can be?
Absolutely. One thing we have to remember is that fat is an insulator. Okay. So, you know, wintertime, as you had brought up earlier, you need insulation just as in your home, in your body. So you have to have some fat on your body to be able to protect, you know, the organs, whatever. So to completely eliminate fat is an incorrect process. You have to have a certain amount of fat in your diet, in other words, to be able to sustain that insulation, to give you more power, to be able just to do the daily activities of living. There's been this misconcept, as you have said correctly, through the years, where don't take in any fat. Absolutely incorrect. Most meats, you know, to a certain degree, some more than others, have a certain amount of fat in them. For instance, chicken or fish are, for the most part, I got to be careful here, but for the most part are lower in fat than, say, beef. But still, lean beef, you know, not consumed every day by any means, but consumed, you know, here and there, is okay. It's not going to harm you as long as it's not consumed on a you know, daily basis. And again, that fat aspect is going to help the body with its normal routines. So hopefully that answers that.
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier about, and respectfully, of course, that you said you didn't want to knock the white bread industry.
Sure.
And I understand, and you're a very polite gentleman, so, you know, I understand where you're coming from. My thought process is, it seems to me that, and this maybe is a motivator for you to convey to clients, but it seems to me that there's a lot of money to be made in this country for people being sick, for people being out of shape, being hooked on, or not hooked, but being reliant on pharmaceuticals, especially as they get older. My question is, do you think that is a problem in this country? And if so, how do you convey that to your clients and others who may look to you for advice? How do you convey that in a way that is motivating to them to be their own individual and not be reliant upon these companies or these drugs, these foods, whatever it is that ultimately are going to take them down?
Yeah. You know, some of these questions you've had tonight have just been so great because it's given me an opportunity to really share with you and the members of our audience really what's true and what's not true. And let's just focus for a minute on that last question because it's probably one of the most important that we're going to talk about tonight before we, you know, conclude. But people, for instance, with high blood pressure, I'll focus in on that for a minute, where, truthfully, there is a pill for every ailment that you could have. My line of thinking is, why take something unnatural into your body if you don't have to? Okay, so focusing on the high blood pressure point of view, proven fact, if we could get a person to drop some weight and do some cardio exercise, again, swimming, biking, running, walking, more particularly walking now, and so on and so forth, they will lower their blood pressure. It's a proven fact. It's very hard, though, to get that across to a client who is able to go to their medicine cabinet, open up a cabinet, take a bottle of pills, and say, okay, all I need to take is one of these tonight, and I'm all set. I don't have to worry about the exercise. Short-term wise, they're probably okay. Long-term wise, as our body builds up resistance to those particular type of medications, what have you, and please don't misunderstand, there's people that need this medication to be able to get by and to be able to function, whatever. I'm talking about someone, that group out there, that's a large group of people, that if they just centered themselves on the basic exercise, they could get away from a lot of the medications that they're on. Of course, medication is money, it's big business, and again, I'm not knocking any of that, but certainly our doctors now, what we're seeing is that they're paying more attention to people that are overweight. They're saying, hey, you should be exercising more. I can remember just when I was a teen, seeing a lot of people that were overweight and talking to them as I started in the business saying, well, what's your doctor had to say about this? And there wasn't a lot of education that was going on from the physician to the patient. That's all changed now, especially with the high inset or onset of diabetes, that type of thing. So, yeah, it's trying to get them to reason or to look at the real reason beyond, you don't have to take some of this medication if you were just doing some simple things. Now, just a disclaimer to what I said here, Michael. I don't want people to think that they could run home tonight after listening to us and stop all their medication, whatever. Of course, that's not the case. It has to be a gradual type of situation, working with the doctor and a qualified trainer to be able to take those steps necessary.
Absolutely, and that's a very comprehensive response to the question. I just want to touch a little bit more on that. When you say that, of course, people shouldn't go ahead and dismiss everything they're utilizing. At the same time, it seems to me that a lot of people like to say, well, my doctor said it was okay to take this.
Yes.
When you follow the money, when you follow the funding, a lot of doctors are getting paid substantial amounts to push products that may not be what they are intended for. They may not be as safe as people think. As a consumer, how do people differentiate between something that may be hazardous or it may save their life? How do they figure out what to select?
There's a saying that I heard back a few months ago, whatever, and that is basically you have to be your own personal advocate. And let's break that down for a minute. Simply, I'll give you an example. I have a great doctor that I've known for many years, and he knows I'm a personal trainer. As a matter of fact, I've trained him and his wife and kids. So there's a genuine respect. But what I've learned from him is that if I don't ask questions, I'm not necessarily going to get answers. So to be your own advocate and to ask, well, Dr. So-and-so, what is the long-term effects of this particular medication going to be? If it's to lower my cholesterol or if it's to whatever. Long-term wise, what could I expect? Just knowing some of those long-term effects of the medication might be enough for patients or clients, individuals, to be able to say to themselves, well, short-term wise, yeah, I have to be on this, but long-term, I really don't want to be. So that game plan has to be set up where a person is in charge of their own responsibility. They have to take the reins and say, okay, this is my life, this is my health, I'd like to live a good age, and I'd like to have quality of life. That's what it's all about. We're not talking about living to age 80 where, forgive me for saying this, where you have to have all kinds of assistance, whatever, or 85. We're talking about quality of life where you're still able to get up, do some things, you know, enjoy life, travel, whatever. And I think people are starting to understand that a lot more now than they did just a few years ago.
I would agree with that, certainly. With the experience that you have, which, again, is very extensive over many years, where do you see the fitness industry heading in the next, I want to say, quarter century maybe? Do you see any trends on the horizon that you think will be something that will, there's like a groundswell building that ultimately will take over our culture? Is there anything like that you see on the horizon?
You know, I think a lot of that is going to depend on these group of what we'll call newbie trainers that some of them I'm responsible for putting out on the streets. I think if they get the message out to the general public that exercise is really where it's all about, I think we'll see some good movement. That's not going to take place on a one-on-one type of training session. Some of it is, but I'm talking about people who want to get back to the community, like in this type of situation where someone could, you know, ask questions such as yourself to a person as myself and get that information out there that in the past has not been able to be shared. There's not a lot new going on in the actual equipment arena where we're going to see, I don't think, a lot of new devices. We may see a variation of this, we may see a variation of that. You never know. People said that the treadmill was the end of things, and then along came the elliptical trainer, and look what's happened now with that. So, yeah, I think it's a combination of a few things, but most important, public awareness.
I think you said it very well before when you said everyone has to be their own advocate.
Yes.
They have to be their own critic, their own promoter. They have to embrace fitness as not just a something to do, not a hobby, but an absolute necessity, because without it, they're going to find that life is not quite what they expected it to be, and really it will be pervasive in all aspects of their life if they are unhealthy.
Absolutely. Well said.
So, well, Gary, I want to thank you for coming on today. We really appreciate the time you spent with us. Again, Gary Catania from Gary's Fitness, Wethersfield, Connecticut. My name is Michael Bizzano. This has been Better Wethersfield. We want to thank you for watching tonight. We will see you next week.